The Christmas Candle Mystery, a Hercule Poirot Mystery, Part 1. The candle that would not go out Christmas Eve had settled upon England like a velvet cloak, soft, cold, and heavy with expectation. Snow lay in polite drifts along the hedgerows, as though nature itself had dressed for the occasion. The village of Whodunit glowed with restrained festivity. Holly wreaths on doors, golden light behind lace curtains, and the distant, uncertain sound of carollers braiding the frost dot. It was to this village that Hercule Poirot, the celebrated Belgian detective, had come quite against his better judgment. "I do not like the cold," Poirot declared firmly, rubbing his gloved hands together as he stood on the tiny railway platform. "It is disorderly. It attacks the mustaches." Captain Arthur Hastings, standing beside him, smiled indulgently. "Come now, Poirot. Christmas in the countryside. Fresh air, roaring fires, good English food." Poirot sniffed. "Food? Yes. But fresh air, bah! It is overrated." They had been invited by Lady Eleanor Ashcombe, a formidable widow of considerable wealth and impeccable manners, to spend Christmas at Ashcombe Manor, her ancestral home overlooking the heath. Lady Eleanor had written personally to Poirot, her handwriting elegant yet oddly urgent. "My dear Monsieur Poirot, I should be greatly honored if you would be my guest this Christmas. There are matters upon my mind. Nothing criminal, perhaps, but I feel safer when order is restored." Poirot had read the letter 3 times. When a lady of intelligence says nothing criminal, perhaps, he told Hastings, it means precisely the opposite. Ashcombe Manor rose from the snowy landscape like a relic of another age, gray stone walls, tall chimneys, and windows that seemed to observe rather than invite. Inside, however, warmth reigned. Logs crackled in vast fireplaces, and the scent of pine, beeswax, and mulled wine filled the air. Lady Eleanor greeted them in the great hall. She was tall, silver-haired, and sharp-eyed, dressed in deep mourning black relieved only by a single ruby brooch. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, extending her hand, "you have no idea how relieved I am that you came." Poirot bowed. "Madame, when a lady requests order, I obey." Hastings noticed that her hand trembled, just slightly. They were soon joined by the rest of the household, assembled like pieces on a chessboard. The guests and residents are Reginald Ashcombe, Lady Eleanor's brother-in-law, a retired colonel with a booming voice and a fondness for brandy; Clara Ashcombe, Sir Reginald's daughter, pale and withdrawn, with eyes that seemed permanently watchful; Julian Mortimer, Lady Eleanor's private secretary, efficient, handsome, and impeccably controlled; Mrs. Penelope Grant, a distant cousin, openly pious and deeply interested in inheritance; Dr. Lionel Brooke, the family physician, jovial on the surface, nervous beneath; Elsie Turner, Lady Eleanor's maid, quiet, observant, and often overlooked. Poirot studied them all while sipping hot chocolate. "So," he murmured to Hastings later, "we have devotion, greed, fear, ambition, and silence. A most promising Christmas." The candle. That evening, before dinner, Lady Eleanor asked Poirot to join her in the chapel room, a small private sanctuary at the eastern wing of the manor. At its center stood a single white candle, tall and thick, burning steadily. "This candle," Lady Eleanor said softly, "has been lit every Christmas Eve in my family for over 100 years. Poirot examined it carefully. "A tradition?" "Yes, but also a warning." She hesitated, then continued. 3 Christmases ago, my husband died. He collapsed here, in this room, beside that candle. The doctor said heart failure." Poirot's eyes narrowed. 2 years ago," she went on, "my nephew fell down the east staircase. Died instantly. The candle was burning. And last year?" Poirot asked gently. Lady Eleanor swallowed. "Last year, my cousin Margaret drank poisoned wine." Again the candle. Poirot straightened. 3 deaths, he said quietly. "Always Christmas. Always this candle." "Yes, and always ruled accidents or natural causes." Her voice dropped. "But this year, I am afraid." Poirot leaned closer to the flame, observing how it burned too steadily, perhaps. "No flicker. No smoke. A candle," he said, "can illuminate. or it can deceive. Christmas dinner was a lavish affair. Silver gleamed, glasses sparkled, and conversation flowed, though Poirot noted how often it stalled. When Lady Eleanor coughed or shifted in her chair, Sir Reginald drank too. And Mrs. Grant spoke at length about Divine. Judgment. Julian Mortimer watched everyone. Clara barely touched her. Food. At precisely 9 o'clock. The lights flickered, then went out. A scream echoed through the manor. When the lights returned seconds later, Lady Eleanor lay slumped at the head of the table, and in the distance, faint but unmistakable, a candle still burned. The death. Brooke examined Lady Eleanor swiftly. "She's dead," he said. "Heart attack, I'd say." Poirot said nothing. He walked calmly to the chapel room. The candle was still alight. He bent, sniffed the air, and frowned. "Mon ami," he said to Hastings, who had followed him. "This candle burns with more than wax." He extinguished it with a silver snuffer. "And now," Poirot said softly, "we begin." Part 2. The Wax and the Will. The body of Lady Eleanor Ashcombe lay serenely upon the long dining table, her expression oddly peaceful, as though death had come to her not as a thief, but as an expected guest. Snow continued to fall outside, indifferent to human tragedy, while inside Ashcombe Manor, fear settled like a second frost. Hercule Poirot stood very still. Silence, he knew, was often more revealing than screams. The aftermath. Lionel Brooke wiped his spectacles nervously. "I assure you," he said, "Lady Eleanor's heart was weak. The shock of the lights going out, well, it could easily cause death." Poirot finished gently. "Yes, doctor, it could. Or it could be made to appear so." Sir Reginald slammed his hand on the table. "This is nonsense. Eleanor was an old woman. People die." Poirot turned his gaze upon him. "Indeed, Sir Reginald, but not always by coincidence." Mrs. Penelope Grant crossed herself. "God has judged this house," she whispered. "That candle." Poirot raised a hand. "Madame, God does not use poisoned wax." The words fell like ice. The candle examined in the chapel room, Poirot worked carefully. He had requested privacy, though Hastings lingered nearby. Notebook ready. The candle lay extinguished, its wax smooth and faintly perfumed. Poirot scraped a small portion with a penknife. "Notice anything, Hastings?" Hastings sniffed. "Smells. Sweet. Almonds?" Poirot nodded gravely. "Bitter almonds. A scent most associated with cyanide." Hastings paled. I mean, Poirot said, that the candle was not merely symbolic. It was functional. He explained slowly. The candle had been hollowed at its core, filled with a crystalline compound that vaporized when heated. As it burned, the poison released itself slowly, invisibly, into the room. "A patient killer," Poirot murmured. "One who understands chemistry and tradition." The will. The next morning, snowbound and shaken, the household gathered in the library. Julian Mortimer produced a sealed envelope. "Lady Eleanor insisted," he said, "that her will be read on Christmas morning." Sir Reginald looked startled. "She never mentioned," Poirot interrupted politely. "Then let us honor her foresight." The will was devastating. Lady Eleanor had changed everything. Sir Reginald received only a modest annuity. Clara Ashcombe inherited nothing. Mrs. Grant was excluded entirely. The bulk of the estate, including Ashcombe Manor, was left to a charitable foundation for orphan children. Julian Mortimer was named executor. The room erupted. She was mad. Mrs. Grant shrieked. Sir Reginald's face turned crimson. Clara said nothing, but her hands trembled. Poirot watched them all. "Motive," he murmured. "How generously it distributes itself." Private conversations. Poirot began his interviews. "Sir Reginald, I loved Eleanor," the colonel insisted. "But she was stubborn." "That will was written when?" Poirot asked. 6 months ago." "And you knew?" Sir Reginald hesitated. "Yes." Poirot nodded. "Thank you." Mrs. Grant. "She stole my rightful inheritance," Mrs. Grant hissed. "But I would never kill." Poirot smiled sadly. "Madam, righteous anger has killed more people than knives." Clara Ashcombe. Clara's voice barely rose above a whisper. She believed the candle was cursed, Clara said. She thought someone in the family was using it. And you? Poirot asked. I begged her to destroy it. Poirot's eyes sharpened. The maid Elsie Turner was last. She stood stiffly, hands clasped. I polished the chapel room every day, she said. But the candle, only Mr. Mortimer handled it. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Always? Yes, sir. Lady Eleanor trusted him. Asterisk. The secretary, Julian Mortimer, remained calm. I followed instructions, he said. Lady Eleanor was obsessed with that candle. She believed it represented truth. Poirot leaned forward. And did you believe her? Mortimer smiled thinly. I believe in efficiency. A discovery. That afternoon, Hastings burst into Poirot's room. Poirot, I found something in the east staircase, the place where the nephew died. He handed over a small metal hook. Poirot examined it. A candle tool, he murmured. Used to extract cores. Hastings frowned. So the deaths weren't accidents? Poirot's expression grew grave. No, mon ami. They were rehearsals. The pattern. Poirot paced slowly. 3 deaths. 3 Christmases. 1 candle. 1 person with access, knowledge, and motive. But, Hastings said, the will benefits no one. Poirot stopped. Ah, he said softly. That is the illusion. Power does not always seek money. He looked toward the snow-covered manor. Sometimes, Poirot whispered, it seeks control. Asterisk Part 3. The flame behind the truth. The snow had ceased overnight, leaving Ashcombe Manor wrapped in a silence so complete it felt deliberate, as though the house itself were holding its breath. Smoke curled lazily from the chimneys, and somewhere deep within the walls, pipes groaned like uneasy sleepers. Hercule Poirot stood at the window of his bedroom, hands clasped behind his back, contemplating not the beauty of the morning, but the ugliness of human intention. The mistake, he murmured, is always there. One must only know where to look. The origin of the candle. Poirot requested that Hastings accompany him to the attic. Hastings blinked. The attic? Yes, where families store not only objects, but memories they prefer not to examine. The attic of Ashcombe Manor was vast and cluttered trunks. Portraits turned to face the wall, broken furniture, and boxes layered with decades of dust. Poirot moved with surprising certainty, stopping before an old oak chest bound with iron. Inside lay journals, their leather covers cracked with age. Poirot opened one carefully. These, he said, belonged to Lady Eleanor's great-grandfather. The journal described the Christmas candle in meticulous detail. It had been created not merely as a symbol of faith, but as a test of loyalty. In times of betrayal, the candle could be altered. Its hollow core used to deliver poison silently, leaving death to appear natural. Hastings stared. You mean the family invented it? Yes, a terrible ingenuity. One generation hides its sins in tradition. The next calls it heritage. Poirot closed the journal, and someone in this house rediscovered the truth. The hidden clause. Julian Mortimer was summoned to the library. Poirot placed the will on the table. Read it again, Poirot instructed. Mortimer complied, his voice steady. Poirot stopped him mid-page. Not that clause. The codicil. Mortimer hesitated. Poirot's eyes hardened. You did not think I would miss it? Slowly, Mortimer retrieved a second page. The codicil stated that if Lady Eleanor died under suspicious circumstances, full control of the estate would temporarily pass to the executor, granting him authority over the foundation, assets, and manor until an investigation concluded. Hastings gasped. You benefit. Mortimer smiled faintly. Only administratively. Poirot leaned closer. Power, he said softly, is the most intoxicating inheritance. A false confession that evening. Clara Ashcombe requested to speak with Poirot. She was pale, eyes hollow. I did it, she whispered. I poisoned the candle. Hastings looked shocked. Poirot did not. Why? Poirot asked gently. She ruined us, Clara said. My father, my future. I couldn't bear it. Poirot nodded sympathetically. You are lying. Clara flinched. "You lack the knowledge," Poirot continued. "And more importantly, you lack the patience." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I wanted it to end," she sobbed. Poirot softened his tone. "And someone used that desire." The final era Poirot returned once more to the chapel room. The candle had been relit by whom? No one admitted. Poirot studied the wick. Then he smiled. "Ah," he said. "There it is." He summoned everyone. "Poirot speaks. You see," Poirot began, pacing slowly, "the poison vaporizes only at a precise temperature. Too fast, it kills quickly. Too slow, it leaves traces." He turned to Dr. Brooke. "You adjusted the wick length." The doctor froze. You were nervous," Poirot continued, "but not guilty. You noticed something was wrong and tried to save Lady Eleanor." Poirot turned next to Sir Reginald. "You drank too much. But you are not clever enough." Mrs. Grant gasped indignantly. Poirot ignored her. Finally, he faced Julian Mortimer. "You alone had access. You alone knew the chemistry. You alone benefited from control." Mortimer's smile vanished. "And," Poirot added, "you made one fatal mistake." He lifted the metal hook. "You left this in the staircase. But you are left-handed. The tool was used by a right-handed person after you staged the earlier deaths." Mortimer's composure cracked. "I only wanted order," he said quietly. "This family was chaos." Poirot nodded sadly. "Yes, and you brought them death." A rest of police arrived before midnight dot as Mortimer was led away. The snow began again. Hastings exhaled. Another Christmas saved. Poirot extinguished the candle himself. "Christmas," he said softly, "is a time for light, not control." Part 4. Ashes after the flame. The arrest of Julian Mortimer did not bring immediate peace to Ashcombe Manor. Justice, Poirot often reflected, was not a candle that instantly illuminated all darkness. Rather, it was a slow dawn revealing damage long hidden by night. Snow continued to fall as the police motorcar disappeared down the winding drive, carrying with it the man who had believed himself the quiet architect of order. In its wake remained a house bruised by truth. The morning after Christmas morning arrived reluctantly. There were no carols. No laughter. Only the ticking of clocks and the low murmur of servants moving through the corridors, uncertain how to behave in a house where tradition itself had been weaponized. Hercule Poirot sat in the drawing room, perfectly dressed, his mustaches waxed with deliberate care. Order, he knew, must be restored first within oneself. Captain Hastings entered quietly. "Well," Hastings said, attempting cheerfulness. "That's that." Poirot did not look up. "No." "Mon ami," he replied. "That is never that. A crime does not end when the criminal is taken away. It ends when the living learn how to live again." Lady Eleanor's legacy later that morning. Poirot requested that the remaining household assemble. Sir Reginald appeared older than ever, his military posture sagging. Clara Ashcombe looked fragile, as though a strong wind might carry her away. Mrs. Penelope Grant wore black lace and resentment in equal measure. Dr. Brooke hovered near the fireplace, his hands still betraying nervous energy. Poirot addressed them calmly. Lady Eleanor Ashcombe, he began, was not merely a victim. She was a woman attempting to correct the sins of her family. He paused. She knew someone was using the candle. She suspected, but she did not know who. And so she changed her will, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Clara lifted her head. She was trying to protect us. "Yes," Poirot said gently. "Even from yourselves." Mrs. Grant scoffed. "By leaving us nothing?" Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Madame, she left you something far more valuable than money. She left you alive." Silence followed. The candle destroyed at Poirot's insistence. The Christmas candle was brought into the courtyard. Servants gathered at the windows. Snowflakes drifted lazily, as if curious. Poirot himself poured the kerosene. "This object," he said, "has caused enough death. Tradition does not excuse murder. Symbolism does not absolve cruelty." He struck the match. The flame caught quickly, greedily consuming wax, wick, and poison alike. Black smoke rose into the winter sky. Clara watched with tears streaming down her face. "It's over," she whispered. Poirot nodded. "Yes, now it truly is." Private reflections that afternoon. Poirot prepared to leave Ashcombe Manor. Sir Reginald stopped him at the door. "I was a fool," the colonel said gruffly. "I saw what I wanted to see." Poirot inclined his head. "Most men do." Clara approached next. "What will happen to me?" she asked quietly. Poirot smiled kindly. "You will live. That is enough for now." Mrs. Grant did not speak to him at all. Dr. Brooke shook Poirot's hand with visible relief. "You saved us," he said. Poirot corrected him softly. "No, doctor. I merely prevented another death." "Saving yourselves, that is your task." Journey home. The train steamed away from Whodunit. As evening fell, Hastings gazed out the window at the fading manor. "A grim Christmas," he said. Poirot adjusted his coat. "On the contrary, a necessary one." Hastings frowned. Poirot continued. "Christmas is about truth, mon ami. About light entering darkness. This house had lived too long in shadow." He closed his eyes briefly. "And besides, no innocent child will now be poisoned by a candle lit in the name of tradition." Poirot's final thought that night. Alone in his compartment, Poirot reflected that Julian Mortimer had not killed for money. He had killed for control. To arrange lives like papers on a desk. To correct humanity into neat columns. Poirot sighed. "The little gray cells," he murmured, "are a gift. But without compassion, they become weapons." Outside, church bells rang in the distance. Christmas had come at last. Epilogue. Months later, Poirot received a letter. Ashcombe Manor had been converted into a children's home, just as Lady Eleanor had wished. No candle burned there, now only electric lights, laughter, and the sound of life continuing. Poirot folded the letter carefully. "A good ending," he said to himself. And for once, he allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Part 5. The silence after Christmas time, like a courteous guest, did not linger at Ashcombe Manor. Spring arrived slowly, coaxing green shoots from the frost-bitten earth, softening the grim memories the house had absorbed. Windows were opened. Dust was cleared. Laughter hesitant at first returned. Yet some silences, Hercule Poirot knew, were not broken by seasons. They followed you. A letter from Hercule Poirot was seated in his London flat, enjoying a precisely boiled egg when the letter arrived. The handwriting was unfamiliar. "Monsieur Poirot, I fear the past is not finished with Ashcombe Manor." Clara Ashcombe Poirot read it twice. Then he sighed. "Ah," he murmured. "The dead are patient. But guilt never." Return to the Manor. Hastings was delighted. "A sequel," he exclaimed as the train steamed through the countryside once more. Poirot was less enthusiastic. "There are no sequels in crime, mon ami. Only consequences." Ashcombe Manor looked different now. Brighter, kinder. Children's drawings adorned the walls. The chapel room had been converted into a small library. But Clara Ashcombe looked worse. She was thinner. Her eyes shadowed. "It's happening again," she whispered. Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Death?" "No," Clara said quickly. "Fear." The new disturbance objects were being moved. Candles, ordinary ones, were found melted. Though UNLIT. Children complained of a strange sweet smell at night. And last week, a caretaker had collapsed briefly in the old east staircase. Poirot listened carefully. "Fear," he said, "is contagious, especially in houses that remember." The psychology of Hercule Poirot requested to speak privately with Clara. "You believe," he said gently, "that you deserve punishment." Clara flinched. "I wanted her dead," she admitted, "even if I didn't kill her." Poirot nodded. Double quotes. "And so your mind recreates danger. You smell poison where there is none. You see candles where there are shadows." "But the caretaker fainted," Poirot finished, "from exhaustion and superstition." He leaned closer. "Guilt is the most effective poison, mademoiselle, and it needs no candle." The final investigation. Poirot examined the so-called disturbances. The melted candles, placed too close to radiators. The sweet smell, Cleaning solvents. The staircase collapse. A loose board untouched since the nephew's death. Poirot gathered the staff and residents. There is no murderer here, he declared. Only memory. Clara's release that evening. Poirot and Clara stood in the courtyard. No crimes remain, Poirot said. But you must forgive yourself. Clara's voice trembled. How? Poirot gestured toward the children playing nearby. By living honestly. By protecting life instead of fearing death. She nodded slowly. For the first time, her shoulders relaxed. Poirot's quiet victory as Poirot prepared to leave. Hastings asked, "Do you ever regret solving these things? Stirring up old wounds?" Poirot considered. "No," he said softly. "Because truth, like light, may hurt the eyes, but it allows one to see." The train carried them away once more. Final reflection that night. Poirot lit a candle in his London flat. An ordinary candle. He watched it burn. No poison, he murmured. No symbolism. Just light. He extinguished it with care. Order, at last. Restored. Part 6. The candle that was never lit. Hercule Poirot had always believed that the most dangerous crimes were not those committed in anger, but those committed in silence. It was precisely such a silence that greeted him at Rosewood Court, a modest but elegant townhouse in Bloomsbury, where he had been invited one bleak February afternoon. "There is no murder," the letter had said. Not yet. Poirot had frowned at that. A house without fire misses. Adelaide Fenwick, the owner of Rosewood Court, was a woman of rigid habits and fragile nerves. "I do not allow candles in my house," she said immediately. Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Not even for atmosphere?" "Especially not for atmosphere," she replied sharply. "Candles encourage imagination." Poirot smiled faintly. "And imagination," he said, "is often the accomplice of crime. The fear misses." Fenwick's problem was simple and deeply unsettling. Every night at exactly 9 o'clock, the smell of warm wax filled the house. Yet no candle was ever found. No flame. No smoke. No explanation. Servants had resigned. Guests refused to stay. And now Mrs. Fenwick feared something worse. "My brother died here," she whispered. Quietly, peacefully, just like Lady Eleanor Ashcombe. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Echoes of Ashcombe, that name again. Poirot walked slowly through the drawing room, noting the arrangement of furniture, the placement of vents, the heavy velvet curtains. "Your brother?" Poirot asked. "Did he fear candles?" Mrs. Fenwick hesitated. "Yes." Poirot nodded. "Fear," he murmured. "Leaves fingerprints." The guests, 3 people, currently resided at Rosewood Court. Mr. Leonard Fenwick, a distant cousin and financial advisor, Miss Beatrice Holloway, a companion with an interest in spiritualism, Mr. Thomas Reed, a quiet lodger recovering from illness. Poirot observed them carefully during tea. Miss Holloway spoke of energies and unseen presences. Leonard Fenwick spoke of finances. Thomas Reed spoke very little at all. The smell explained at precisely 9 o'clock that evening. The scent returned. Poirot closed his eyes. "Paraffin," he said calmly. "Heated but not burned." He moved to the radiator, removed the cover, and revealed a wax-coated metal capsule. "A clever device," Poirot said. "It releases scent, not flame." Mrs. Fenwick gasped. "But why?" Poirot turned slowly. "To frighten," he said. "And to control." The motive. Leonard Fenwick broke first. "I only wanted her to sign," he muttered. "She listens when she's afraid." Poirot's voice was cold. "You learned from Ashcombe. You understood that fear does not need poison, only memory." Leonard collapsed into a chair. "I never meant to." "Kill," Poirot nodded. "Most monsters do." "Not." Resolution. The police were summoned. Miss Holloway wept theatrically. Thomas Reed quietly packed his bags. Mrs. Fenwick sat trembling. Poirot knelt slightly before her. "Madame," he said gently, "you are safe. But you must reclaim your house from fear." She nodded slowly. Poirot alone that night. Poirot walked home through fog-lit streets. Candles glowed in shop windows. He felt no fear. The world, he reflected, will always find new ways to weaponize old symbols. He adjusted his coat. But as long as there are little gray cells, there will be light. Part 7. When Christmas. Refused to be silent, Hercule Poirot had hoped quietly. Foolishly, that Christmas would leave him alone this year. It did not. Point 1. The invitation. That felt like a warning. The letter arrived 3 weeks before Christmas. Sealed in dark red wax. Poirot disliked red wax. It lacked restraint. Monsieur Poirot, last Christmas, no one died in my house. This year, I am not so certain. Lord Alistair Blackwood. Poirot read the letter twice. Then, a third time. Ah, he murmured. That is not an invitation. That is a confession waiting to happen. Hastings, reading over his shoulder, brightened. A country manor? Christmas? Old aristocracy? Sounds promising. Poirot fixed him with a look. Mon ami, when Christmas promises silence, one must listen very carefully. 2. Blackwood Hall stood isolated on the Yorkshire moors. Its stone darkened by centuries of wind and regret. Unlike Ashcombe, it was not elegant. It was defensive. Candles burned everywhere. Too many of them. Poirot noticed immediately. Excess, he said softly. Always suspicious. Lord Alistair Blackwood greeted them in the great hall. He was a tall, gaunt man with eyes that never quite rested. I don't trust the dark, he said abruptly. Or the light. Poirot smiled politely. A wise position, my lord. 3. The household. Poirot observed the gathering carefully. Lady Miriam Blackwood, the second wife, beautiful, distant. Much younger Edmund Blackwood, the heir, bitter. Perpetually drunk Agnes Blackwood, the unmarried sister. Devout, severe Victor Holla, family solicitor. Precise, cold Father Rowan, the local priest. Uneasy in luxury Margaret Lowe, a companion hired to keep peace. Poirot felt it immediately. This house was not afraid of death, that it was waiting for it. 4. The tradition, that evening. Lord Blackwood explained the custom. At midnight on Christmas Eve, he said, we light the vigil candle. It burns until dawn. Poirot's mustaches stiffened. And if it goes out? Lord Blackwood swallowed. Then someone will die before the year ends. Hastings laughed nervously. A superstition? No, Agnes Blackwood said sharply. A record. Poirot's eyes flicked to her. 5. A familiar smell later. Alone in his room, Poirot paused. The air. Sweet. Too sweet. Not almonds. Something older. Wax, he murmured. But altered. He opened the window at once. 6. The first collapse had happened before dinner. Margaret Lowe screamed. They found Father Rowan slumped in the west corridor. Alive but barely. Doctor summoned. Pulse weak. Poirot knelt. No candle near him. Hastings whispered. Poirot nodded. Which makes it worse. 7. The vigil candle. Midnight. Arrived. Snow battered the windows. The family gathered. The vigil candle was enormous, ancient. Scarred. Repaired many times. Poirot examined it openly. Layers. Different wax. Different eras. A palimpsest of fear, he murmured. Lord Blackwood lit it. The flame caught. Steady. Too steady. 8. Poirot thinks. Poirot did not sleep. He thought. Ashcombe. Rosewood Court. Blackwood Hall. Candles, not as weapons, but as permission. People behaved differently. When tradition absolved them. 9. The death at 3:17 a.m. The candle flickered. At 3:18 a.m. Edmund Blackwood screamed. They found Victor Holla, the solicitor, dead in the study. No poison. No wound. Just terror frozen on his face. The vigil candle still burned. 10. The light. Poirot gathered them at dawn. One of you, he said calmly, believes the candle kills. Agnes Blackwood crossed. Herself, it always has. Poirot shook his head. No, it only convinces. He turned to Lady Miriam. You moved the candle. Wax, she gasped. Poirot continued. And you? Edmund, you frightened Holla to death. Edmund laughed hysterically. He deserved it. Poirot's voice hardened. And Lord Blackwood, you allowed it. Silence fell. 11. The truth. Lord Blackwood spoke at last. My father invented the myth. To control us. To keep us obedient. Poirot nodded. And now it controls you. Still. 12. The ending the vigil candle was extinguished. For the first time in 200 years. No thunder. No death. Just silence. 13. Poirot's reflection as Poirot departed. Hastings asked, "Why do people cling to these things?" Poirot looked back at the dark hall. Because believing the candle kills is easier than admitting we do. Part 8. Ash, authority. And the weight of truth morning at Blackwood Hall did not arrive with light. It arrived with authority. The police came at precisely 8:30. Their boots echoing through corridors that had known centuries of whispered obedience. Superintendent Gerald Whitcomb, a man of square shoulders and narrower imagination, took command with brisk efficiency. Hercule Poirot watched quietly. Authority, he knew, often mistook noise for certainty. 1. The official version. Whitcomb stood beside Victor Hale's body in the study. Heart failure, he said. Shock-induced. Poirot inclined his head. Induced by what, Superintendent? Whitcomb frowned. Fear, perhaps. He was not a strong man. Poirot smiled faintly. Fear, he said, is rarely spontaneous. It is cultivated. 2. The house under question. Each resident was questioned again, this time under law. Lady Miriam Blackwood, she wept beautifully. I was asleep, she insisted. I heard nothing. Poirot noticed her hands. Perfectly steady. Edmund Blackwood, he was defiant. He knew too much. Edmund said of Hala, he deserved what he got. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Deserved, he repeated softly. Agnes Blackwood rigid, cold. The candle judges, she said. It always has. Poirot felt a chill. Not superstition. Conviction. Lord Alistair Blackwood exhausted. I allowed the tradition, he admitted. I thought it kept order. Poirot closed his eyes. Briefly, so did many tyrants. He murmured. 3. Poirot and the priest Father Rowan survived, but barely. Poirot visited him in the guest room. You smelled wax, the priest whispered, and incense, together. Poirot nodded. Someone wanted you frightened. Not dead. The priest's eyes filled with tears. They wanted me silent. 4. The hidden crimes. Poirot requested access to the estate. Records. Victor Hale had been busy. Forgery, coercion, inheritance, manipulation, but he had not acted alone. Poirot traced signatures. Patterns. Double quotes. 2 hands, he murmured. One fearful, one ambitious. 5. Agnes Blackwood unmasked. Poirot confronted Agnes privately. You believe the candle is divine, he said. Yes. You have enforced its will. She did not deny it. My mother starved herself when the candle flickered, Agnes said calmly. My brother fled the country. Fear preserves purity. Poirot's voice hardened. No, it preserves cruelty. 6. Edmund breaks. Edmund collapsed under pressure. I only shouted, he sobbed. I told Hale the candle had marked him. He panicked. Poirot nodded, and Agnes ensured he believed it. Silence. The arrest. Agnes Blackwood was taken into custody, not for murder, but for coercion, conspiracy, and psychological abuse resulting in death. Edmund was charged with manslaughter. Lord Blackwood watched silently. Poirot did not look at him. 8. Poirot's anger. That night, Poirot stood alone in the great hall. He was angry. Not at the killers. At the system. At tradition. At intelligence used without mercy. Order, he whispered, without kindness is tyranny. 9. Hastings asked, did you ever doubt? Hastings asked quietly. Poirot answered honestly. Double quotes. Yes. 10. The candle's end. The vigil candle was destroyed under police supervision. Agnes screamed as it shattered. Nothing happened. No death. No judgment. Only wax. 11. Aftermath. Blackwood Hall was closed. The myth died publicly. Newspapers mocked it. But Poirot knew better. Myths do not die. They migrate. 12. Poirot's burden on the train home. Poirot stared at his reflection. How many candles, he wondered. exist only in the mind? Hastings said nothing. 13. Final line. Poirot closed his eyes. Next time, he murmured, the enemy will not be wax. Part 9. The candle inside the mind. There are crimes, Hercule Poirot had learned, that leave no bodies behind. They leave something far worse. Questions. 1. After Blackwood, London welcomed Poirot back without ceremony. No reporters. No letters of gratitude. Only fog, thick, yellow, and persistent. Poirot stood at the window of his flat, watching shadows dissolve into one another. Blackwood. All was finished, but it had followed him home. 2. The sleepless nights. Poirot did not sleep well. When he closed his eyes, he did not see faces. He saw flames, not violent ones, not dramatic ones. Small flames. Candles. Always. Candles, burning steadily, patiently, waiting. Poirot woke each night at precisely 3-17. The same hour Victor Hawley had died. Coincidence, Poirot told himself, but the little gray cells were unconvinced. 3. Hastings notices. You're quieter, Hastings said one morning over breakfast. Poirot adjusted his napkin. I am thinking. You always think. Yes, Poirot replied. But now I am thinking about thinking. Hastings frowned. That sounds unhealthy. Poirot smiled. Thinly. Introspection often is. 4. The question Poirot avoided. Poirot had always believed in order, symmetry, logic, cause, and effect. But Blackwood had shown him something disturbing. People did not need poison. They needed permission, a symbol, a tradition, a belief that removed responsibility. The candle had never killed anyone. People had killed because the candle allowed them to stop feeling human. 5. A visit from the past. One afternoon, Poirot received an unexpected visitor. Superintendent Whitcomb. You were right, Whitcomb said gruffly. About the myth. About fear. Poirot nodded. Double quotes and Whitcomb hesitated. We've reopened 3 old cases. Different towns. Same pattern? No candles, but the same obedience to tradition. Poirot closed his eyes. The migration had begun. 6. Poirot's doubt. That night, Poirot sat alone in the dark. He did something unusual. He lit a candle. He watched it carefully. The flame did nothing. It did not judge. It did not command. It did not absolve. And yet Poirot felt uneasy. Is it possible, he murmured, that I too have used order as a candle? He thought of suspects broken by logic, confessions extracted by certainty, lives rearranged by his conclusions. Justice, yes. But also control. 7. The unasked question Poirot had never asked himself. What happens when I am wrong? Not factually. Morally. What if truth, delivered without mercy, became another form of cruelty? Blackwood had not needed a murderer. It had needed believers. 8. Hastings confronts him. You're not retiring, Hastings said suddenly one evening. Poirot looked up. I did not say that. You didn't have to. Poirot sighed. I am tired, mon ami. Tired of murder? No, tired of certainty. 9. The letter never sent. Poirot wrote a letter, then tore it up, then wrote it again. To whom it may concern, there are crimes I have solved. There are consequences I have not. He folded it carefully and burned it. The candle flame flickered. Poirot watched it go out. 10. Acceptance. The next morning, Poirot made a decision. He would not stop solving crimes, but he would no longer worship order. He would question his own conclusions as fiercely as he questioned suspects. The little gray cells, he said softly, must serve humanity, not rule it. 11. A quiet Christmas. Approaches. Christmas approached once more. Shop windows glowed. Candles returned. Poirot did not fear them, but he respected them. Symbols were powerful. That was the lesson. 12. Final reflection of the part. Poirot stood at his window as snow began to fall. There is a candle, he thought, inside every mind. Some use it to see. Others use it to burn. He turned away from the glass, resolved. Part 10. The last candle. Snow fell relentlessly on London. blanketing streets in a quiet so complete it seemed unnatural. Windows fogged with condensation, and carriages clattered over icy cobblestones. Yet inside 14 Duke Street, Hercule Poirot's flat, there was no warmth, no festive comfort. Only the soft, insistent flicker of a single candle burning on his polished desk. It was December 24th. Christmas Eve 1. The letter that returned the morning had brought a letter. Thin and pale, smelling faintly of wax. The handwriting was unfamiliar, neat, angular, careful. Monsieur Poirot, a candle waits in a house you know not, but the flame has already touched it. No one can see it except those who fear it. You have solved deaths, yes, but this will not end without you. A friend of tradition. Poirot read it carefully, then folded it without comment. Hastings, perched across the room, peered curiously over his tea. Another Christmas case? Hastings asked with mock cheerfulness. Poirot shook his head. Mon ami, it is not a case. It is a test. And tests, he said slowly, are more dangerous when they are personal. 2. The invitation to Winterly Manor by late afternoon. Poirot and Hastings were traveling to Winterly Manor, a remote estate on the Scottish Highlands. Snow had piled into deep drifts, and the fog made the world outside the carriage windows almost invisible. Poirot observed the landscape with his keen eyes. There, he murmured, lies isolation, the perfect cradle for superstition. Hastings shivered. Oh, murder? Poirot raised a delicate eyebrow. Or fear. Often fear precedes murder, and sometimes it suffices alone. Winterly Manor loomed like a fortress, its stone walls dark against the dimming sky. The driveway was lined with lanterns, all flickering as though anticipating what was to come. 3. The residents inside. The household was gathered in the drawing room. Poirot catalogued them mentally. Lord Sebastian Winterly, a patriarch of vast estates, with a voice like gravel and eyes like steel. Lady Cecilia Winterly, his wife, delicate and charming, yet with a rigid smile that never reached her eyes. Thomas Winterly, the heir, a young man with a taste for risk and defiance of family tradition. Margaret Winterly, the sister, withdrawn, her fingers always intertwined in nervous patterns. Reverend Alcott, the family chaplain, pale and fidgety, apparently devoted to God and order alike. Fiona Blake, governess and companion, quiet, observing, and seemingly invisible to all but Poirot. Poirot noted immediately. The air was charged. Not with excitement, but with expectation. 4. The candle's legacy. Lord Winterly approached Poirot with measured courtesy. We have a tradition, he said, older than this house itself. On Christmas Eve, a candle is lit in the North Tower. It burns until sunrise. If it goes out, Poirot's mustaches stiffened. If it goes out? He asked softly. Misfortune, Lord Winterly said. Not always death, but disruption. Some say it judges the family, revealing secret guilt or malice. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, another ritual disguised as morality. Humans are always in need of absolution. Hastings whispered to him, or punishment. Poirot nodded. Precisely, mon ami. 5. The first signs that evening, as the family prepared for dinner. Minor disturbances began immediately. A candle in the west wing flickered unnaturally. A note appeared on Thomas Winterly's desk, unsigned. Reading, The Flame Watches. Fiona Blake discovered a small patch of melted wax on the drawing-room carpet. Poirot observed quietly. These are not accidents, he murmured to Hastings. They are warnings. And warnings, he added, often precede the real crime. 6. Dinner interrupted. Dinner was tense. Conversation stumbled from one topic to another. Lord Winterly drank wine with exaggerated care, while Lady Cecilia spoke of holidays past with forced cheerfulness. Margaret Winterly scarcely ate, her hands trembling as she held a fork. Reverend Alcott mumbled prayers under his breath. Unnerved by the flickering candelabra at precisely 9:17 p.m. The lights in the main hall dimmed and the North Tower candle could be seen through the distant window. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The flame burned too steady. Hastings leaned over. Too steady? Yes, Poirot replied softly. Not natural. Someone interfered with the wick. 7. The first death at 11:03 p.m. A scream shattered the manor's fragile calm. It came from the North Tower. Poirot and Hastings ran immediately. There, at the base of the spiral staircase, lay Reverend Alcott, collapsed, face pale, lips blue. No blood, no wound. Poirot examined him swiftly. Poison? Hastings asked. No, Poirot said, shaking his head. Fear, reinforced. Panic-induced heart failure. His mind has been manipulated. The candle gave him permission to believe he was judged. 8. Secrets revealed. Poirot requested the household gather in the library. One by one, he began interrogations. Thomas Winterly. I didn't mean for him to die. Thomas cried. I only wanted him scared. Lady Cecilia. I followed instructions. I thought the tradition would teach respect. Margaret Winterly. I only moved the candle slightly to see if he would notice, she whispered. Poirot listened, connecting invisible threads. All of you, he said quietly, have been complicit. Not in murder, but in creating the conditions for it. Each acted in obedience to fear, tradition, or ambition. 9. The mastermind. Finally, Poirot's gaze fell upon Fiona Blake, the governess. You, he said. Silent, observing, always invisible. Fiona's face betrayed nothing. The letters, Poirot continued. The wax patches. The careful manipulations. You wanted chaos without touching anyone. She met his gaze, unflinching. Yes, she admitted. To show that fear itself is a weapon. To test who would break under it. To prove that a single candle can control a family more than any law. Poirot's expression darkened. And now you know, she said. That fear is stronger than love. 10. The final confrontation. Poirot stepped forward. Hands clasped, calm and deliberate. Fear, he said softly, is indeed powerful, but it is not absolute. The little gray cells, he added, exist to illuminate darkness, not to succumb to it. He removed a small silver snuffer from his coat pocket. Now, he said, extinguishing the North Tower candle through the telescope window. Let us see what remains when the flame no longer judges. The house was silent. No flickers. No shadows. No whispers. Just people. Vulnerable. Alive. Human. 11. Resolution. Fiona Blake was taken into custody. Thomas, Lady Cecilia, and Margaret faced severe reprimands and psychological counseling. Lord Sebastian Winterly, confronted with the reality of his family's susceptibility, finally understood the danger of blind tradition. Poirot observed it all quietly, satisfied but not joyful. This, he murmured to Hastings, is the weight of responsibility. Some candles, he said, burn within the mind, unseen, and extinguishing them requires courage, not force. 12. Christmas morning. Snow fell lightly over Winterly Manor on Christmas morning. Children in nearby villages played with wooden toys. Church bells rang softly. Poirot stood by the window, observing life outside. Finally content that no one else would be judged by a flame tonight. Hastings handed him tea. Another Christmas solved, Hastings said. Poirot smiled faintly. Mon ami, he said, solving is not enough. One must also prevent the imagination from killing. He lifted his cup to reason, compassion, and the little gray cells. 13. Final reflection. Later, alone. Poirot lit a single candle in his flat. It burned steadily. No judgment. No threat. Just light. He watched it until it went out naturally. A symbol of vigilance, not control. And with that, Hercule Poirot allowed himself a rare, deep sigh. Christmas had survived, not because the candles were magical, but because humanity had been reminded of its own power to choose fear or mercy. The end.